This video is sponsored by Brilliant. Stick around to the end to learn how you can learn gooder. Discussion. What even is a regional bird Pokemon? You see, there is no super straightforward answer because, it's a fan-made term. But then again, you know what else is a fan-made term? Evolution, Pikachu clone, legendary duo, and legendary trio, referring to sets of games as generations. The weather trio, pseudo-legendaries, and even shiny. Yes, even shiny was a fan-made term until it was later adopted officially. So, there is no official, this is the answer to our question about regional birds. And yet, if you asked a Pokemon fan, they'll likely give you a confident answer. And then you ask a different Pokemon fan, and they will confidently give you a different answer. So here's how I've always defined it. To me, the regional birds are the evolutionary lines of Pidgeot, Noctowl, Swellow, Staraptor, Unpheasant, Talonflame, Toucan, Corviknight, and Kilowattrel. That's it. One line per region, and there are similarities here. They all evolve. They are all flying type. They are all fitting of the region they were introduced in. They're all birds. And that's actually where the similarities end. Some of them evolve once, others twice. And at first it was easy to define what a regional bird was because they were all purely normal flying type until Generation 6. But even then, if that was the defining factor, why wouldn't you count Braviary here? It's a normal flying type bird that's fitting of the region it was introduced in, and it evolves. And thus you begin to see the trickiness of defining regional bird. For a sort of real-world equivalent here, consider fish. Everybody knows what a fish is, right? These are all fish, and yet, other than living in the water, none of these have much else in common. These are all totally different kinds of animals, some of whom are not even close to the same branch on the tree of life, and thus, fish is, scientifically speaking, a taxonomically and cladistically useless term. It doesn't mean anything. Meaning, yes, everybody knows what a fish is, and if you asked them what a fish is, they would probably give you an answer pretty confidently, but if you actually try to define it in a specific way that makes perfect sense, you find that there's no real way to do so. So, why wouldn't you count Braviary as a regional bird? Well, one thing that does make it stand out among this group is that it evolves late, at level 54. Compare that to my list of regional birds, who all evolve rather early, level 18 to 25 for the first evolution, and the early to mid-30s for the second, if there is even a second. So, okay, Braviary doesn't count, nor does Mandibuzz, and to sort of doubly rule them out, they do tend to be version exclusive with each other, unlike the rest of the birds here. But then, what about Spearow? It's found on the early routes, and it evolves early, and it's normal flying type for all that matters. Why do I, instinctively, at my core of cores, not want to include it in my list of regional bird Pokemon? Is it just because it was super mean to Ash? I mean, that's not a good reason. Lots of Pokemon are mean to Ash. But actually, okay, speaking of Ash, he had a Pidgeot, a Noctowl, a Swellow, a Staraptor, and an Unpheasant, and a Talonflame. Ash always had the regional bird Pokemon. So that's very likely a big part of what forms my definition for it, and thus also many others' definition for it. But Spearow, and Wingull too for that matter, sure, they're early route evolving birds, but Ash didn't have them, so they aren't as important, so they are not the regional birds. That obviously doesn't work as of Gen 7 now, does it? Ash doesn't have a Toucan, he doesn't have a Corviknight either, and now he's gone. So I don't think we can use him as a part of our definition. Well, let's back up to Wingull again. Why don't I want to include it? I mean, it's right next to Swellow in the Pokedex. Is it because it's water flying type? But as of Gen 6, that doesn't matter. Unless Fletchling. Fletchling may eventually evolve into Talonflame, but Fletchling itself is still normal flying type. Maybe the regional birds still have to start as normal flying. The normal can later be swapped out for another type later. Except no, that also doesn't work because Rookidee and its whole line are just flying type until eventually slapping steel on there. And Watchroll, it's electric flying from the start. being a bit stupid, I mean stumped, and this being a fan-made term and all, I asked the fans on my Twitter, how would you define regional bird Pokemon? Bad punctuation aside, I found that the most common response, other than just a flying type bird, because like, duh, was the mention of early routes. But what route does Watchroll call home? Like, if it was in the first linear area in Scarlet and Violet, I would absolutely count that, but it's an open world game. So where do they spawn? Okay, so still near the area you start, the nearby beaches. Maybe it's okay to still consider early game a qualifier, since routes might not really be a thing anymore. But I think I could further specify common here. Like, if you overlay Watchroll and Kilowattrel spawn locations, you get the entire coastline and the oceans. They are based on coastal and pelagic birds after all. And plus, shouldn't a regional bird be found all around the region? Like, would you count Natu as a regional bird? I wouldn't. Sure, it evolves early, is found early-ish, and it's a flying bird, but like, it's only found in the ruins of Alph. Compare that to Hoot Hoot, who is found, in like half of the places. But problem, red flags, siren alarm blaring, this would mean we'd have to include Wingull, which I get nobody wants to do. But like, Wingull is actually significantly more common than Taillow. Oh no! And it's found on earlier routes than Taillow. So, okay, the only definition that kinda works now is flying type bird Pokemon that evolves in the region it was introduced in, and is early in the regional Pokedex, and found early in the game, and is common throughout the region. Thus, a regional bird. So no Ducklet, no Doduo, no Natu, no Swablu, no Rufflet or Volibee, and no Rowlet. It is a starter, so that is kind of its own thing. But that does leave us with my original list, as well as Wingull and Spearow. I don't like that. Not at all. Regional bird may be arbitrary and useless and not really mean anything, but there has to be some way for me not to count them. I have got to find a way to gerrymander a definition. Maybe stats? I did see some folks on Twitter specify base stat total. 450 to 500, according to Dark and Windy, and that makes sense. The region's iconic regional bird should be good. At least good seeming on the surface. Bigger number equals better and all that. That kind of good, not necessarily like good in the meta, you know. So let's see where that gets us. Starting with the birds I'd consider. Yeah, they all fit that range. And so, you know, the numbers in parentheses are their original stat totals. Over time, but especially in Gen 6 and 7, various Pokemon would get buffed for balancing's sake. So, where do Fearow and Pelipper fall? Whoa. We've cut them out of the definition!
A regional bird is a common, early game, flying type bird Pokemon that evolves with its final stage having a base stat total of 450 or more.
Sucks to be you, Chatot! But wait, hang on. Originally, Swallow and Noctowl don't fit this definition. So originally, did those games not have regional birds, or did the definition change at some point? Interestingly, Swallow and Pelipper had the same base stat total when they were introduced. Only after being buffed did Swallow exceed Pelipper, who was also buffed. They didn't forget about it, they just didn't buff it nearly as much. So when Ruby and Sapphire were first released, was the intent to have them both be regional birds? Possibly, but I think what's more likely is that Game Freak wasn't thinking about this whatsoever, because it's a fan-made term, and one that didn't really become common until quite a bit after this generation of games. I feel like it started around Gen 4. I could just be remembering wrong. But what is possible is that maybe Game Freak eventually caught wind of this term and how most people counted Swallow but not Pelipper, and so buffed them accordingly when the time came to do so, of course. Or maybe none of this matters. Still fun to think about though. But I think that if you really needed to have a definition that includes only these Pokemon both before and after all the buffing, you would have to say that the definition changed at some point. Perhaps before this definition that we gave, it was simply, instead, a regional bird is the early route normal flying type Pokemon that Ash had. Gen 7 was the first time Ash didn't have one, and Gen 7 is also when most of these buffs happened to make Swellow and Noctowl count in our newest definition without including Pelipper and Fearow. Lines up fairly well. So I guess those are the definition. That was it originally. This is it now. They're both completely useless, but I guess to some people it does make these birds stand out as something special, and they probably really like that, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But that was a lot of critical thinking and logical deduction, huh? It's my favorite kind of thinking, really, and that, along with math, computer, and data science, are exactly what Brilliant wants to bring you. Brilliant is the best, free, and easy way to improve your own logical thinking to get a step ahead no matter your skill level or preferred pace. You can take it slow between school breaks, or crunch it out as a refresher over the weekend to excel in your career, or even just to keep your mind sharp. If you don't use it, you lose it. STEM fields are getting more and more competitive, so give yourself an edge by starting early and become a natural in statistics, programming, engineering, or even building neural networks. My favorite part, of course, is the interactivity. Fun logic games like this are exactly what helped me excel in school decades ago, and are still keeping my brain a-burrin' today. And you can try it out free for 30 days, and if, like me, you love it, you can go to brilliant.org/Loxton and get 20% off of their annual plan. Link in the description. Thanks for watching, stay smart out there, and now how would you define regional bug? I'm not going to think about this. So here's some questions for you. Why does Mega Pidgeot have Dragon Ball Z hair? Why does a woodpecker evolve into a toucan? What's with Kilowattrel's sack? And which of all of the regional bird Pokemon have the most tail? Well, be sure to check out these videos when you can. And until next time, never stop using your noggin.